London, July 1987. In one of the most luxurious districts in the world, Knightsbridge, just steps away from high-end stores like Harrods, sat the discreet and seemingly impenetrable Knightsbridge Security Deposit. It wasn't a bank in the traditional sense, but a private vault facility used by the ultra-wealthy people who preferred secrecy over visibility. Inside were millions in cash, gold, jewelry, and priceless items hidden behind thick steel doors. The man behind what would become one of the largest robberies in British history was Valerio Viccei. Born in Italy, Viccei wasn't just another criminal. He was charismatic, intelligent, and dangerously bold. By the age of 32, he had already committed dozens of armed robberies across Europe. Viccei studied the Knightsbridge vault facility carefully. Unlike traditional banks, its security relied heavily on trust. Clients were given private access to their boxes, and identity checks, while present, were not as rigorous as one might expect for such a high-value location. On July 12, 1987, Viccei and an accomplice entered the building posing as customers. They were calm, well-dressed, and convincing. They requested access to a safe deposit box, nothing unusual. Staff escorted them inside, following routine procedure. But within moments, everything changed. Viccei and his partner pulled out guns. They subdued the employees and forced them into the vault area. Then, in a chilling move that showed just how meticulously the plan had been designed, they placed a sign on the front door: closed. Anyone approaching would think the business had simply shut for the day. Inside, the robbery continued unnoticed. With complete control of the building, Viccei allowed more members of his gang to enter. One by one, they began opening safe deposit boxes. For hours, they looted the facility. Customers' life savings, rare jewelry, gold bars, everything was taken. By the time they were done, the gang had stolen an estimated £40 million equivalent to over £100 million today. Eventually, the gang left as quietly as they had arrived. The employees were locked inside, helpless. It wasn't until later that the alarm was raised and authorities realized the magnitude of what had occurred. After the robbery, the gang didn't celebrate in London. They knew staying in the UK would be too risky. Within hours of pulling off one of the most daring heists in history, Valerio Viccei and his crew began to disappear quietly, strategically, and without drawing attention. Viccei himself fled back to Italy, moving between safe locations and using his network of criminal contacts to stay hidden. Italy, at the time, was familiar territory for him. It offered protection, connections, and distance from British law enforcement. Authorities in the United Kingdom were scrambling to piece together what had happened, but the criminals were already gone. Millions in cash and valuables had vanished across borders, making recovery extremely difficult. It looked like Viccei had executed the perfect escape. But then came the mistake that would turn everything around. Before the robbery, Viccei had been living a flashy lifestyle in London. He drove expensive cars, spent freely, and enjoyed the attention that came with wealth. Among his prized possessions was a Ferrari, an unmistakable symbol of his success and ego. At some point before or around the time of the robbery, his Ferrari was seized by British authorities, reportedly over legal or registration-related issues. It wasn't connected directly to the robbery, but it was enough to take the car off the road and into police custody. For most fugitives, this wouldn't matter. They would cut their losses and never look back. But Viccei wasn't like most criminals. He couldn't let it go. In a move that shocked investigators, Viccei returned to England, the very country he had just robbed. It was an almost unbelievable decision. He risked everything for a car. Once back in the UK, authorities were already on high alert. The investigation into the Knightsbridge robbery was intense, and his name had surfaced as a prime suspect. It didn't take long before police tracked him down. He was arrested. The man who had orchestrated a £40 million robbery, who had escaped cleanly across borders, was now in custody because he came back. Viccei was sentenced to over 2 decades in prison. It should have been the end of the story. Viccei began studying the routines of the prison. Guards, schedules, movements, everything. He kept a low profile, avoiding unnecessary attention, waiting for the right moment. That moment came in 1988. Viccei managed to gain access to an opportunity that most inmates never get. He was taken outside the prison under supervision. Reports suggest he was allowed out for what appeared to be a controlled activity, possibly tied to cooperation or standard prison procedures at the time. It was a rare window where security was thinner than inside the prison walls. And Viccei took it. With precise timing, he made his move and escaped custody. There was no dramatic explosion, no violent breakout, just speed, planning, and execution. Within moments, he was gone. Authorities reacted immediately, but Viccei already had a head start. What made his escape even more remarkable was what happened next. He didn't wander aimlessly or hide nearby. He had a plan ready. Using his criminal connections, he quickly secured transportation out of the country and fled back to Italy. Once again, he had slipped through the system. The escape embarrassed British authorities. A man responsible for one of the largest robberies in history had not only been captured, but had now escaped. It reinforced the very image Viccei had built for himself. Untouchable, strategic, always one step ahead. Back in Italy, Viccei returned to the life he knew: crime, power, and risk. He continued operating in the shadows, relying on the same boldness that had defined his past. But even the most carefully planned escapes can't last forever. In 2000 in Milan, his story finally caught up with him. During a confrontation with police, Viccei was shot and killed. His prison escape became part of his legend not because of violence or chaos, but because of how simple and controlled it was. A man who robbed a vault without raising suspicion escaped prison the same way. Quietly. Precisely. And almost unbelievably.